Hey everybody, I just wanted to make a short, simple little video explaining the difference between Nashville tuning and high-strung tuning according to those people who differentiate. Now, if you clicked this video because you're just generally interested in learning more about these tunings and how they work and how you might be able to incorporate them into your songwriting or your arranging or your recording workflow, stick around because I will talk about that. But to avoid having this video be clickbait, let's just go ahead and answer the question right up front. Because if you go to the Wikipedia page as of the time that this video is posted, you'll notice that Nashville tuning and high-strung tuning, those phrases are used interchangeably. However, there are people out there who distinguish between the two, and it all comes down to the third string, or the G. Now we know that with this style of tuning, we still have the same E, A, D, G, B, and E string arrangements. However, with Nashville tuning, the E, A, D, and G are all lighter gauge strings tuned an octave up. With high-strung tuning, it's just the E, A, and D that are lighter gauge strings tuned an octave up. The G for high-strung tuning is tuned just like a regular old G on any acoustic, 22 gauge to 24 gauge that you would be using. That's it, that's the whole difference. So if you're watching this video right now going, okay, but why does that matter? I'm gonna play you a few clips now of Nashville tuning and high-strung tuning with this differentiation between the G, back to back, and then I'm going to come back and try to answer that question to the best of my ability about why you might want to think about using these two types of tunings in different recording settings or different songwriting arrangements or whatever. So here we go. All right, so let's talk about what you just heard. Let's talk about why these tunings even exist. And let's talk about why we bother differentiating between Nashville tuning and high-strung tuning, why this video matters. So the reason that these tunings exist have a lot to do with recording, okay? So what we're doing when we're removing the low strings and putting a lighter gauge on there and tuning them an octave up is we are really kind of defining where the acoustic guitar track, or at least this acoustic guitar track, is going to sit in a mix. If we think about songs, a lot of modern songs especially have a lot of instruments and sometimes have a lot of guitars. If those guitars are all taking up the same space in a mix in terms of the frequency, it can get muddy, it could get messy. And what you're doing is you're really carving out one little spot in that mix for another acoustic guitar track or just for an acoustic element in a song without getting in the way of everything else. So if you picture an EQ for a minute, what you're doing is you're taking off the low end or the bass of an acoustic guitar, but still having that acoustic guitar in your mix. Now, some songs use it as a layer on top of, or rather underneath of, another acoustic guitar in order to add something to it. And that's when we start getting into differentiating between Nashville tuning and high-strung tuning. Because with high-strung tuning, we are really just taking off that low end. With Nashville tuning, we're taking off that low end, but we're adding a little bit on the high end in terms of that third string. It kind of adds a sparkle or a jangle that's not normally there with an acoustic guitar track. And really, that's why we differentiate, because some songs call for that high-end addition, while other songs just really want to add an acoustic element without getting in the way of everything else, which is where you would use high-strung tuning. That's it. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, can't I just do that with an EQ plugin? Can't I just take the low end off of a regular acoustic guitar track? You could, and it might get you what you want depending on what you're looking for. But what you're doing with an EQ is you're sort of chopping off a lot of what's going on naturally with an acoustic guitar. Whereas with a high-strung guitar or a Nashville Tune guitar, you're getting the full guitar with all 6 strings doing what they're supposed to be doing when you're playing them. It's just not taking up the same full frequency range as an acoustic guitar. Now, the last big point that I want to make in this conversation about these tunings kind of gets into recording theory a little bit. It kind of gets into different people's approaches to recording, but I do think that it ties a nice bow around this conversation. The reason I started getting into these tunings more heavily is because I realized that my approach to recording beforehand was a little scattershot. It was a little sort of like buffet style. I was recording a lot of guitar tracks, and then at the mix stage, making decisions about which of those tracks to keep, how to really kind of fit them all frequency-wise without getting in the way, and sort of how to arrange all of them. And I was hitting option paralysis a little bit because I gave myself kind of too many things to do during the mix. So I started using this tuning along with sort of adopting an approach to tracking where everything was planned and arranged ahead of time, thought out, and really cut a lot of the fat out. So with this type of tuning and with that approach, by the time I got to the mixing stage, everything was kind of already sitting where it needed to be. There was a lot less work to do in the mix, and the mix was a lot more, it was a lot tighter. It was a lot more there already. So, you know, just something to think about if you are finding yourself in a position where you're just doing too much in the mix and, you know, kind of making decisions that maybe you should have made during the tracking. Sort of back it up, reel it in, think about how you're arranging the guitars, and you might just find a spot for this type of tuning in your workflow at that point. Anyway, I'm gonna close this video by just playing some tracks from the earlier clips in a full mix setting so that you can hear the difference between Nashville tuning and high-strung tuning in a mix setting. So other than that, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you got something from this, and until next time.